Is there a hidden secret? Well, I reviewed all the advice and guidance going around on NoFap at the moment and what it stands for, and I came to the following conclusion. NoFap is becoming a joke, and I'm here to change that. Here's how. So you've clicked on this video, probably because you're either interested in the whole idea of the movement, or because you're already deep inside this, like I was for 2 years already. I learned a lot from my experience with this, and the main point I have is that I have my headset on. Is that nobody has the full story, but they all want to sell it to you like they do. It's a lot like if you were learning to cook and the chefs you watch all use completely different things. It's confusing, and honestly, it starts to get a bit annoying. The advice going around the internet at the moment just doesn't work, and it's not very clear. I've seen countless people saying that they just can't prevent a relapse from happening. When I was listening to all the advice, it was arguably the most I'd ever relapsed on that whole journey. You're probably thinking it, so I'm going to answer the question. Do I think NoFap is pointless, and what made my experience so different? No, to answer your question. I think the whole idea of developing discipline and having control over your urges is an incredible thing to have, and I would encourage it 100%. However, I do think that it's turned into a very marketable thing and a very thing to do, which is why you see so much of it on social media now. It's turned into the manly thing to do, and it makes everyone who's listening to it feel awful, because if you fail, you feel awful. Not because you're incapable of doing it, but because you have been given a puzzle without all the pieces, and that's just not fair. So what makes my experience different? Honestly, I took my own advice. Now you're probably thinking that is the most egotistical thing you've heard today. And you're not wrong. But let me explain myself before you comment. The main advice I hear comes in 3 forms. You've got accountability, identity, and clarity. And these were great starting points for a younger me who was looking to enjoy all of the benefits that this movement advertises. The focus, the confidence, all of that kind of stuff. However, the more stuff I watched and the more methods I learned, the more I relapsed, and I guarantee you right now, no matter where you are in this journey, you're about to hear my experience and my advice, which will change the way you view all your challenges in the future. Not just this. And that's a big claim, but hear me out. I realized about a year into things that nothing was changing, and that the advice was actually keeping me stuck in the same place and failing over and over again, which just was annoying. And it was really starting to piss. Now, what I realized was that something had to be missing from my mindset that was holding me back. If everything outside wasn't fixing the problem must be internal. YouTubers and influencers, myself included, should all be listened to with a grain of salt. They do not have the full story. They do not have the answers. They will not get you to 90 days. They cannot get you to break a habit off of motivation and a good idea here and there. They just can't. Why not? Because they are not you. What nobody is explaining is that addiction affects many people but it also affects everyone in a completely different way. You will hear success stories of people who have done actually pretty well. And that's great and all, but the moment you try to replicate it, and you know what I mean, you fail and you feel awful. That's great news actually, because they aren't you. How on earth do you expect something to work just because it worked for somebody else? If that was the case for advice on the internet, we'd all be rich and we'd all be famous and we'd all be happy. Does that make sense? It should make sense. This is no way calling out the NoFap community itself, by the way, and the influencers who have talked about it before. I think the advice they actually give is pretty good, but the people listening to it are ruining their own lives because they think it's just the be-all and end-all of how you would go about solving that problem, which just isn't true. That's why I refer to it as a movement, because it has become more of a social thing that people are telling people about and trying to improve others, which is also great, but it's not really what the community wanted in the first place. So I'm now going to tell you from my experience a way of doing things that should provide better results than any of the methods you have been spoon-fed and paid money for. I'm going to call this the way of doing things, and I'm going to call it reflection and deflection. It's 2 stages. Now, this can kind of be used on literally anything from what I found, but of course I'm going to talk about how it saved my journey and saved me from what I only fear would be years of still trying if I didn't do it. It's just 2 stages, and it loops every single time that you notice something going wrong. Stage 1 is reflection. Now, I remember once I relapsed like a complete moron, and I sat there so annoyed with myself. However, this time, for the first time in my life, I focused on why exactly I did what I did. Why did I end up like that? Was I not exercising enough? Was I not controlling my thoughts? That wasn't it. For me, I was in a loop. I found that there was a bunch of bad habits that would lead me to relapsing. My focus was on the wrong thing. You focus so much on not relapsing that you completely ignore the triggers that get you to that point anyways. If you never remove these triggers, you are destined to relapse. I'll say it again. If you don't remove these triggers, you are destined to relapse. So I want you to write down every time you make a mistake. It's gonna be long, but you're just gonna have to do it. Analyze why you got to that point. What were you feeling at that time? What were you doing before? You need to understand yourself better and your behavior better than any idiot on a screen could ever tell you. Me. Once you know why this happened, we can then move on. Deflection. This is the fun stage. You need to pick something that you've identified is leading you to the same mistake over and over again. Remove it. It's gone. The odds are you picked up on it because it's not particularly good for you anyways. For me, I found that video games were a terrible habit that led to other bad habits, and so that's where I started. I shifted my attention away, and I focused solely on removing that bad habit instead. But that doesn't help me right now. No, not in the short term. But you want this for life, so you're gonna have to accept that it won't happen now. What you haven't been told is that you don't just sit there and decide to relapse. There are many things that lead to that. So find a way to remove these triggers first, and then slowly, every time you relapse, you'll get better and better, and as you repeat the process, everything on that list will be reduced until it's gone. And you will see results before you are done. I can promise you that. I listened only to myself and focused solely on what works for me, and I saw results that absolutely no level of advice could provide with me on this. If you have any questions, leave a comment, because I guarantee you the answer will help you, not just yourself, but others like you too. If this new way of approaching things has started a fire in your mind, then you're the kind of person that this channel was built for. Hit subscribe and join us as we take over, because that is the whole point of this year. We're going to take over. And remember, one step at a time, and you'll be fine.